The garage bay was open at dawn. That's how I knew my late wife's car was gone. 20 years of her life wiped clean in one night. My son sold it for a Paris trip with his wife. He still had the spare key from when he lived here. He didn't ask. He didn't look me in the eye. I didn't shout. I counted wrenches until my hands stopped shaking. Then at 7 a.m. the phone rang. A calm man said he had Nora's car. He said there was something my wife wanted me to know. Something she hid before she died. My name is Sam Mercer. This is how my dead wife saved my life and taught my son and his wife a lesson they won't forget. Tell me where you're watching from and subscribe for the rest of the story. The coffee hit the sink and went cold in a brown ribbon. Dawn through the kitchen window was thin and gray. I could see the bay from there, the rectangle of open air where the door should have been, the empty stall where the GTO slept. I stepped outside in house shoes and the concrete lifted the cold into my arches. The smell hit first. Orange shop soap and old leather. Under the ceiling bulb, the floor held the outline that a car leaves behind. An oil shadow was almost black where Nora always parked. I stood in it and listened to the quiet tick of the garage light. The pegboard was the next thing my hands found. Wrenches outlined in marker, sockets in a row. The torque wrench with NM stamped near the neck hung one hook to the left. She was neat. She was always exact. I slid it one space over until the painted outline and the metal matched. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. I counted 8 slow breaths, and then I counted wrenches. 3/8, half, 9/16. My voice stayed where it should stay, inside my chest. The driveway gravel spoke a soft roll of familiar car. Adam pulled in and killed the engine like he was trying not to disturb anyone. He sat for a moment and looked at the house he grew up in. Then he came toward me across the yard with his shoulders down and his hands in his jacket pockets. He saw the open bay, and then he saw me. Tessa stayed in the car, sunglasses on in the morning with no sun. Her screen lit her face a hard blue. Adam stopped at the edge of the concrete. He looked at the oil shadow and he looked at his shoes. He said he needed to talk. He said he was sorry it happened this way. He said he sold the car yesterday for $15,000 to help Tessa make a buyer's meeting in Paris. He said the trip mattered for her work and he could not let her down. He said the car was sitting here doing nothing. He said I did not drive it anyway. He spoke fast and then slow, and then he ran out of words. I did not raise my voice. I kept my hand on the pegboard because it kept my hand on something that was not his face. I asked where the title was. He said the paperwork was in the brown file cabinet in the office bottom drawer, the folder with vehicle written in Nora's hand. He said he had the spare key from when he lived here. He said he still remembered where we kept everything. He did not look me in the eye. He kept glancing back toward the car where Tessa waited with the engine off and the air running. The torque wrench felt solid under my palm. I did not ask why he thought $15,000 was fair. I did not ask why a marriage needed Paris to hold it together. I asked one thing. Did you take the title or a copy? He said he took what was there. He said he was sure it was fine. I said it was not fine. I said it was done. And then I stopped, because I could feel my words getting ahead of my breath. And that is how a person says things he wishes he could unsay. Nora kept a thermos on the workbench with a dent near the rim. I picked it up and set it back down. The bench still had a stain in the shape of a rag she used to fold in half and then in half again. I lined up a set of feeler gauges so they nested clean. I told Adam I would call him when I had gathered myself. He nodded. He looked hurt in a way that was younger than he is. He said he was trying to build a life. I said I heard him. He walked away as if the air were heavy. He got in the car. Tessa looked at me over the top of her sunglasses and smiled in a way that showed no teeth at all. The car slid back onto the street and turned toward the main road. Inside, the clock over the stove reached 7. The phone on the workbench vibrated and lit up. Unknown number. I let it buzz once, twice, a third. I picked up. The voice on the other end was steady and a little tired. He said he had Nora's car. He said my name. He said he had something my wife wanted me to find. He gave me the name of a dealership on the east side, Pike Heritage Motors, and told me he would wait for me. He did not push. He did not sell me anything. He sounded like a person who keeps the promises he makes. The call ended and the garage felt different, not less empty, just different. I set the phone down and looked at the oil shadow and the bright dust hanging in the strip of light under the open door. A car that sits in one place long enough leaves a story in the floor. That was my one thought that was not practical. I closed the door button and watched it roll down until the sun cut off and the thin hum of the motor faded. I walked to the office. bottom drawer, brown folder, vehicle. Nora's handwriting was narrow and even. Titles, copy of registration, receipts for parts with dates like notches on a tree, carb kit, weather stripping, rear main seal. The title for the GTO was not there, a space in the folder where it should have lived. I sat at the desk and wrote down the list of what was present and what was missing. I wrote the dealership address from the call on a sticky note. I wrote Adam 15,000 and underlined it once. My hands slowed down as the pen moved. My breathing followed the pen. Breathe. Write. Breathe. I went back to the garage and washed my hands, though they were not dirty. Orange grit bit the lines in my palms that rough citrus soap Nora liked because it meant the work got done. I dried my hands on the same towel I have been meaning to throw out. I looked at the pegboard again. The torque wrench hung where it should now. The sockets were in order. The radio on the shelf showed the same 2 stations it always shows when the power flickers. The bench lamp made a clean circle of light on the wood. I left it on, and then I turned it off. I left it off, and turned it on again. Then I turned it off. I stood there long enough for a neighbor's sprinkler to start and stop. When I moved, it was to pick up Nora's mileage ledger. It was the only thing of hers I would let myself hold that morning. The cover was soft from her hands. The first page had a map of the lake road in pencil, with a note to me about downshifts. I did not read the rest. Not yet. I set it where the light would not touch it and closed the office door behind me. By the time I got back to the kitchen, the coffee had cooled into a smell like pennies. I poured it out and rinsed the mug and turned it mouth down on the rack. The clock over the stove said 7:12. The phone vibrated once and stopped. A text from the same number. We open at 8. I will leave the car inside. Ask for Harold. The words were simple. I stared at the screen until they meant what they meant. I changed into jeans that did not mind a shop floor and a clean shirt that did not say anything. I put on the boots I wear when I want my footing to matter. I took the folder with the receipts. I left the space where the title should be inside. I locked the back door, even though no one on this street locks doors in the morning. On the way to the garage, I tapped the light switch twice. Habit. I opened the bay door and then closed it. The room darkened in a way that felt like privacy rather than loss. The phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. It stopped before I reached it. I could feel the day beginning to move without me. On the bench, the thermos with the dent sat in the same ring it always sat in. I picked it up and put it in the bag with the folder. I do not know why I did that. I just did. Sometimes your hands decide before your head does. I turned once more to the pegboard. The tools did not move. Neither did I. When the clock said 7:29, I took the keys from the hook near the door and stepped into the morning that had turned from gray to pale. The airfield where I used to work would be waking up now. Beacons flicked off as the light grew. Engines are thinking about the first start of the day. Procedures keep planes in the air. Procedures keep men human. I would start with a conversation and a ledger. I would start by asking for Harold. I would bring what I had and keep my voice low. The phone vibrated one more time as I locked the house. Same unknown number. A short voicemail badge blinked and then stopped. I have not played it yet. I put the phone in my pocket and walked to the truck. The steering wheel was warm from the window sun. I sat and put my hands at 9 and 3 without thinking. I breathed once. I turned the key. The truck started easily. I let it idle while I looked at the closed door of the garage. We begin with restraint. We do not run into a fire with our eyes shut. We take inventory. We drive across town. We ask for the man who says he kept a promise to my wife. Then we see what the day is willing to tell us. Nora's handwriting turned a car into a calendar of us. Every mile we covered was a day we did not waste. I opened her leather ledger on the kitchen table, and the paper lifted a little as if meeting my hands halfway. Pencil grooves caught the morning light in thin tracks. Date, route, weather, miles. One line read, Lake Loop. Next line read, Errands with Adam. Another read, Just Drive, as if movement itself counted as a job done. The brass lighthouse keychain lay where she used to drop it after parking under the rafters. I turned it once and heard the ring click against itself. The ledger smelled faintly like garage dust and orange soap, like everything she enjoyed more than talking about. On the inside cover, she had taped a Polaroid. Nora's hand on the shifter wedding band bright against the black knob, a blur of the dash behind it. I pressed my thumb over the band until I felt its exact circle through plastic. I did not think about what the car could sell for or what parts cost. The car was an adding machine for hours spent together. 2 rows meant a Saturday. 5 rows meant a season. When she wrote first snow next to a short distance number, it came back to me at once. She had driven half a mile up the street and back to feel how the rear wheels stepped sideways if you asked too much from a cold road. She laughed so quietly the seat moved instead of the air. The phone hummed near the sink. I let it count 2 beats, and I answered. The voice from earlier said his name, Harold Pike. He said he owns Pike Heritage Motors on the east side. He said the GTO is inside his building, not on a lot. He said he owes us, and that is why he called me before anyone else. I asked him what he meant by owing. He said Nora put a roof over his brother's head once when it mattered, and the story was longer than a phone would allow. He said she asked him to do one thing for her if the road bent this way. He said he will not let the car disappear into someone else's story without seeing me first. I told him I would come. He said he would be at his desk until I walked in. He said he would bring a small box Nora left and some paper with my name across it in her hand. I wrote his address under the word dealership in block letters. He paused. He said there is a second matter he thinks I should prepare myself to hear. He spoke like a person setting a wrench carefully back on its outline. He said we would handle it in order. First see the car, then see what Nora left, then decide without any pushing from him. After the call, the house hushed itself again. I brought the ledger closer and read the earliest miles. She had bought the GTO with a stubborn idea and a patient paycheck. The first page had more ink than pencil. Later pages traded ink for graphite bold for soft. A tiny note to herself read, "Adjust idle after the first oil change." Another read, "Teaches Sam to feel third without looking." On a page halfway through the book, there was one line that made my throat thicken. It read that Adam asks if he can ride to market. Then in the next box, she wrote, "Yes." I turned the pages with the back of my knuckle to keep from leaving oil that was not there. The empty stall outside the window sat like a missing tooth. I did not look at it long. I looked down. She had drawn a tiny arrow at the top of a page and written, "Remind Sam to check tire pressure before long drives." I could hear it the way she would say it. Small, certain, humane. She never raised her voice to tell me what mattered. She raised a tool or pointed with 2 fingers, or wrote it down where my hands would eventually go. A message is a kind of evidence. A ledger is better than an argument. I could argue with Adam, or I could carry this book into whatever came next. I chose the book. I slid the lighthouse into my pocket because I did not like seeing it on the table without keys attached. The metal was warm now, and the ring sat against my thigh like a little clock. The phone buzzed again with a voicemail alert. I pressed play and listened. Harold's voice came through, shorter, recorded before the second call. He said, "Mr. Mercer, if you do not pick up, please know the vehicle is stored indoors and secure." He said, "I will make no decisions until we have spoken." He said, "I'm sorry about the way I met your wife. I'm grateful for it too." His voice carried a weight that did not sound like guilt. It sounded like gratitude that had been waiting its turn. I looked at the Polaroid again. The corners had gone soft, the whites turned to a color between cream and smoke. Her hand on the shifter was not a pose. It was caught mid-thought fingers, not clamped palm, not hovering, just touching the thing that moved us forward. I remembered the first time she put my hand there over hers and told me to feel the engine in the lever, not to listen to feel. She said, "You set the next gear with your wrist before your foot knows it wants to lift." I did not argue with that. I learned it like a person learns a slow song. The house wanted movement. Houses tell you when to leave if you trust them. The little click in the hallway baseboard does it. The light at the sink was pitching from gray to pale. I closed the ledger and the clap of the covers together was small, a polite thing, and it still felt like a decision. Memory is evidence. That sentence showed up and stayed. I am an electrician by trade. Circuits either hold or they do not. Records matter. Loads matter. If a breaker trips, you read what is on the label before you start flipping things at random. I slid the ledger into the canvas bag with the receipts and the dented thermos, and I put the bag by the back door. Before leaving, I went to the garage one more time and stood at the edge of the stall. Empty bay. The oil shadow was shaped like a map with no legend. I touched the stud where Nora had penciled a mark the year we redid the shelves. I lined the torque wrench once more, even though it did not need it. I turned the shop radio knob. It threw a hiss and then the faintest voice from a station I did not know. I turned it off. As I walked back through the kitchen, the phone rang again. I took it without looking at the screen. Harold said he had just rolled the GTO out from under a cover and the paint was what it should be. He said he remembered the note Nora had asked him to keep and had placed it on the passenger seat so my hands would be the first to move it. He said he is saying this so there are fewer surprises. He said surprises belong to sales floors, and this is not that. He said bring any documents I have and we will make copies on his machine. He said we will start with what is true and let everything else hang itself. I told him I had a ledger and a folder and my voice. He said that was enough. He said he owed us an explanation about his brother and that it could wait until I had seen the car. He said he will not keep me longer than the work requires. He said he will not speak for Nora beyond what she wrote. I thanked him and did not know exactly for which part. I snapped the ledger shut a second time because the first time felt like a rehearsal. The sound made the glass in the cabinet give a tiny ring. Then the day moved forward at a clip. I locked the back door. I picked up the canvas bag. The lighthouse keychain tapped my thigh like a metronome as I crossed the kitchen. The hallway smelled like laundry soap and something sweet from a bowl of fruit I kept forgetting to eat. Outside, the air split between cool shade and a sun that had not made up its mind. I put the bag on the passenger seat and sat. My hand found the steering wheel at 9 and 3 again. Habit is a harness. I told myself out loud to observe and not accuse. I told myself to let paper talk first. I told myself I could still love my son and still insist on the procedure. I told myself to save everything I wanted to say to him for a quiet table and a ledger between us. The truck turned over without hesitation. I let the idle settle and watched the garage door. Nothing shifted. Good. I backed out slowly and pointed the hood east. As the neighborhood gave way to wide lanes and stoplights, I saw a tall sign shape ahead in my mind before I saw it with my eyes. A big P with a stripe of neon that probably used to burn brighter than it did now. Pike Heritage Motors. I pictured letters flickering to life, one tube at a time. I pictured a covered car lifted into light. I pictured a piece of paper with my name the way Nora wrote it when she wanted me to show up on time. The truck eased through a yellow that did not need drama. A cloud moved over the sun like a hand taking the glare off a page. Somewhere over the highway, a beacon at the airfield clicked off because there was enough daylight now to trust the eye again. I drove and let that small fact steady me. When I turned onto the frontage road, the dealership sign was there in real space. The lower bar of the P glowed first, then the upright, then the edge of a cursive H hummed to life. The flicker found its rhythm. I pulled in and felt the gravel under the tires change the sound inside the cab. I cut the engine and sat a breath longer. Memory is evidence. We do not argue. We examine. Then we decide. I stepped out with the canvas bag and the lighthouse tapping my thigh in 2 beats to the door. Under bright floors and covered chrome, Harold met me with eyes that had already cried. The building carried that quiet, a good shop earns the kind built from clean tools and paid invoices. He shook my hand like a man used to signing the bottom line and led me past a row of cars, sleeping under breathable covers. He said the GTO was inside, not on display, not at risk. He said we would take this in order. First the car, then the paper Nora left, then any number I wanted to know. He pulled the cover like a carpenter lifts a drop cloth. Color slid into the room. Carousel red with the right black stripes, the kind of red that looks like heat even in shade. The judge call-out on the fender sat where it should. The stance told me more than paint ever could. No lean, no apology. The lenses were clean, not polished to death. Harold watched my face like a man checking the idol with his ear. He did not talk while I walked a slow circle. He opened the driver's door and stepped back. He said the interior had come to him in pieces years ago for a consultation, and he recognized the hand that had put them together. He meant Nora. I put my palm on the wheel and felt how the grain fit the meat of the hand. He said he brought in a man who judges at national meets for a quiet look 2 summers ago. The man told him the car could park under any light and hold up. He said the documentation was clean. Copies of the original build sheet, PHS invoice, photos of the frame-off work. Correct the code on the heads, correct date on the carb. He said the market was strong for this level. He said a car like this can trade above 100,000 without much argument when the paperwork reads true. I stood still and let the number land where numbers land. He let the silence be silence. Then he said Tessa took 15. He did not spit the name. He said it like a fact you had to set next to the others to feel the room temperature change. He said the sale was processed through him because he would rather be the wall the car hits than watch it vanish into a quick flip. He said he paid what she asked and told her he would handle the rest. He said she smiled like she had done something smart. He said he thought about calling me in that moment and did not because he wanted the car inside these walls first. I sat in the driver's seat and watched the reflection of the roof lights bend across the hood. The ashtray was closed. The AM/FM unit looked older than it was on purpose, a face you leave original to honor the work underneath. Harold stood at the doorframe and lowered his voice like a person walking into a chapel. He said Nora left one task with him 2 years ago. If Sam ever comes to you without her, you are to show him where to look. He said your wife used my shop to make a small change and she asked me to keep my mouth until the day I could not shake her hand. He reached across and tapped the ashtray with his knuckle. Twice. The metal answered with 2 soft clicks, the second one a shade lower like something caught behind it. He said Nora had him install a shallow false bottom, just enough to pocket what needed keeping. He said it would resist a curious hand and open to a patient one. He stepped back and told me to do it. He said if I were hearing this from him, the road had bent and she could not take the wheel. I pressed my thumb to the edge and slid as he showed. The ashtray stopped and then lifted a hair beyond where it should. The extra panel revealed itself like a card from a deck. Beneath it sat a manila envelope with my initial written in her narrow hand. For S. Under that, a little wax-wrapped bundle the size of a matchbox. The manila had weight, the kind that means paper and more than paper. I set it on my knee and unwrapped the wax paper. A small key fell into my palm with a voice only a key makes. Safe deposit. The telltale long neck. A brass tag around the head stamped First County and a number. Harold did not crowd me. He leaned on the doorframe and looked at anything that was not my face. I slid a finger under the flap and ran it along the glue. Nora's hand filled the first page in that tidy script that made even bad news feel manageable. She wrote that if I were reading, timing had been taken from us. She wrote that she had placed 2 things where I would look with my hands, not my eyes. She wrote that the key would get me into something meant to keep me steady where surprise would try to move me. She wrote that the envelope held a map she had started when she began to worry about the way Tessa spoke about safety and stairs and the size of a house where a widower lives alone. She wrote that I should not fight a story with a speech. I should fight it with a ledger, a title copy, and a witness. Harold cleared his throat once. He said his brother worked on the airfield years ago, took a fall, lost hours, lost coverage, spun out, the way good men do when systems and luck both turn their backs. He said Nora showed up at a meeting and organized a collection the week the rent came due. He said she did it like she was setting a table. No fuss, no credit. He said the envelope was his way of not letting her name get small in his mouth. I asked him about the sale paper. He nodded and brought a folder. He showed me the bill of sale with Tessa's signature and the amount she had asked for. He showed me the check copy endorsed into her bank the afternoon the title changed hands. He showed me the title application she had completed with my name written where the seller would be if the seller had signed. He said the office kicked it because the signature did not match the record, and he had stalled her with a story about a clerk needing to see me on Monday. He said the car did not leave. He said the car would not leave until my hands were the last to touch the switch. I told him my son still had the old key. I told him I let that key stay on a hook too long. He said fathers let a lot of things hang a little long and that does not make them wrong men. He said we would use what we had and not waste time wishing for more. He said the number did not embarrass him the way it might embarrass some dealers because the number allowed him to get the car into a room where it would be protected. He said the number now was a record we could staple to other records to tell the story clean. He asked if I brought documents. I handed him the canvas bag. He carried it to a desk with a copier that looked like it could handle 1,000 pages before breakfast. He made duplicates of the receipts and the ledger cover and the folder labels and even the Polaroid where Nora's hand rested on the shifter. He slid each copy into a sleeve and labeled it with a thin black pen. He did not hurry. He did not waste motion. He said he would staple nothing I might want to separate later. He said, "These are your documents. I am the table we are sorting them on." Back at the car, the ashtray lay open like a small mouth. I slid the false bottom back into place until the second click found its seat. The sound had a finality to it that did not feel like losing. It felt like honoring the way she designed this part of the day. I tucked the envelope and the key into the bag and closed the zipper. Harold said we could put the cover back now. He asked if I wanted a minute without him. I said yes. I sat alone and set my hand on the wheel again. The seat had the memory of us in it. Cars keep that the way houses do. The bezels watched me without blinking. The past tense walked around the room once and then sat down so the present could work. When I stepped out, Harold was ready with a clean power cord for the battery tender, a simple way of saying the heart beats until we ask it to move. He turned to logistics. He said there was a bank 2 miles east with safe boxes inside a vault that hummed like morning. He said he would call ahead to let a manager know I was coming with a key. He said he would hold the GTO where it was until I returned and longer if I asked. He said there was a second envelope in his office I should read after the vault because Nora had staged this like a careful mechanic stages a repair. Access the box, strengthen your footing, then hear the rest. I told him I had one more question and it was practical. He nodded the way men nod when they prefer practical. I asked whether my son could fix the number on the sale by claiming a misunderstanding. He said misunderstanding lives where details go to hide. He said our path goes the other way. Verified documents, proper sequence, clear chain from the money to the signatures to the car. He said if we keep our steps small and correct, the people who like disorder will trip over their own speed. He walked me to the door. The neon in the sign outside hummed like it had finally made up its mind to glow steadily. He said he would be at his desk when I came back and not to rush. He said I was not the first man to stand where I stood, and he hoped I would be the last on this particular story. He said the rest would open when the key met the box. Behind me, the ashtray clicked shut as if it wanted the last word. In my head, the sound became a low machine hum, steady and patient. The sound a vault makes when men who keep their promises are working on the other side. In box 219 lay quiet arithmetic, the kind you can hold in your hand. Bonds Nora bought for rainy days and a map of tomorrow's storm folded thin enough to hide in plain sight. The vault breathed a low machine hum as the banker turned 2 keys and looked at me the way people look when they are about to put certainty on a table. We signed the ledger with a shared pen that left a clean line. The metal drawer rode out smooth as a drawer that gets opened by careful people. Inside a long envelope with my name in Nora's handwriting, a stack of clipped papers secured with a brass fastener and a smaller sleeve stamped with the bank's crest. The lamp at the viewing table washed everything the color of a green bottle. I broke the envelope seal and read what Nora had set in order. She had bought a ladder of municipal bonds in ordinary years when our life felt like it would go on forever. Maturity's staggered coupons, modest principle intact. There was a summary she had typed and signed with her initials, a line at the bottom that said, "We do not chase yield, we buy time." The banker stood just close enough to see the page numbers and not the numbers themselves. He asked if I wanted him to run a current value and income estimate. I said yes, because the point of a record is to be read. He brought a printout that carried authority without drama. He said the bonds and the dividends could carry my utilities, taxes, groceries, and a plain life. He said, "You are more than okay, Mr. Mercer." He said, "Security first and comfort later, that is how smart people sleep." I nodded because there are moments when you learn that relief can be quiet. We made photocopies on the bank machine and he stamped them with a seal that bit the paper just hard enough to be felt by a thumb. In the smaller sleeve was a list of safe deposit box contents updated 6 months before Nora died. At the bottom, a sticky note in her hand. "Don't argue, document." I put the note back exactly where it had been. The second stack, the brass fastener one, was not financial at all. It was clipped articles and her own typed summaries under the heading, "Pattern Not Accusation." The first page had Tessa Lang at the top and then 3 short paragraphs that read like a pilot checklist. Employment gaps with matching social media gaps. Recycled phrases about safety for aging parents. A preference for the word downsizing said as if it were mercy. Behind that, 2 names I did not know. A man in Phoenix who sold his mother's condo to pay for a facility she did not need, and a man in Tampa who liquidated a small auto shop after being told the stress would kill his father. There were dates and phone numbers and notes about where to verify public records. Nora had underlined the word verify. She had circled assisted living brochures collected from our kitchen trash on a Tuesday evening, and she had typed them into this file as exhibits. Each clip had a date stamp. I could see her at the desk feeding pages into a scanner while soup cooled on the stove. I read until the lines began to tilt, and then I stopped. I stacked the papers in the same order and slid them back into the brass clip. I asked the banker for a second set of copies, one for me and one to sit in the box untouched. The copier light bar swept slowly, and the sound it made settled my chest. Every time a page returned to the tray, I wrote a simple label in block letters. Bonds, income summary, contact numbers, pattern file. I signed the back of each label in small letters as if to witness my own work. The banker asked if I wanted to leave any originals in the box. I said the bonds and the most sensitive pieces should stay. I said I would carry copies for action and keep originals under steel. He nodded and slid the drawer shut with 2 fingers. When the vault door closed behind us, the building's ordinary noise came back. Phones, shoes, pens, the human soundtrack of a weekday morning. He walked me to his desk and offered a folder meant for loan closings. I used it to square the pages. He printed a fresh account summary and placed it on top like a lid. He asked if there was anything else he could do before I left. I said there was one thing. I asked him to notarize a simple statement that I had accessed Box 219 on this date and made copies of the contents for personal records. He said of course and reached for his stamp. He watched me sign and then pressed the seal into the paper so that the raised letters showed even in the green lamp's afterimage. He said, "Keep that on top of your file." He said paper on paper beats memory on a good day and saves you on a bad one. Outside, the sun had picked a side and stayed with it. I sat in the truck and put the folder on the passenger seat where Nora would have sat where the canvas bag sat now. I did not think about price or paint. I thought about the steady way a bond pays when it says it will, and the steady way a note in a familiar hand can keep a man from saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. Independence fuels patience. Patience fuels justice. The sentence arrived and I decided to keep it. At a red light, I slid the sticky note out of the folder and read it again. Don't argue. Document. A small part of me wanted to drive to Adam's work and talk until I had no voice left. The larger part of me put the note back and drove to a copy shop instead. I made one more set and handed over $2.12 without the feeling that I had lost anything. On the way out, I bought a pack of binder clips and a thin black pen that wrote without bleeding. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the day had become an afternoon willing to listen. I carried the folder into the kitchen and set it on the table. I washed my hands with the orange grit soap until the smell brought the garage into the room. Then I spread the papers out like a mechanic lays parts before assembly. Copy first. Originals second. The bank's stamp marks were facing up so I could see the bite marks catching light. I wrote a 1 in the right corner of the bond summary and a 2 in the corner of income. I made a modest file map on a single sheet so there would be no rummaging. It read, Dollars, Evidence, Contacts, Sequence. I took the brass fastened stack and skimmed again this time for verbs, phrases Tessa preferred. We worry. We just want. For your sake. All of them sounded like help until you lined them up and watched the pattern show itself. In the margin, Nora had typed one sentence that landed with more force than anything in the folder. Fear sells faster than facts. Speak facts anyway. She had not underlined it. She did not need to. The kitchen clock clicked toward evening while I rehearsed the next hour in my head. Call Harold. Tell him the box gave me footing. Tell him I have what I need to choose words carefully. Ask him to scan and email the bill of sale copy to a folder I created with the name Record Not Story. I would not use social media. I would not tell a neighbor. I would not text Adam a paragraph he could show Tessa to feed whatever she was building. I would wait, and when I spoke, it would be at a table with paper and the kind of patience a man earns cleaning contacts in a breaker panel until the lights stop flickering. The phone vibrated and I let it buzz twice before answering. It was the banker again saying he had realized I would benefit from one more summary that broke out taxable and tax-exempt income for planning. He asked permission to email it in an encrypted form. I said thank you and gave the address. He said, "We are here for you." He said that in a way that means we did our job and will continue to do it. I marked a square on my file map called tax and drew an arrow to later. Security first, comfort later. When the email arrived, I printed it on my small home printer that makes the room smell faintly of warmed plastic. I stamped it received with the date using an old stamp from the airfield that I had kept because it reminded me to keep time honest. I clipped it to the income page. I slid the Polaroid of Nora's hand on the shifter between 2 sheets of blank paper to keep it safe and wrote image evidence on the top edge in small letters. Then I closed the folder and pressed the air out with both palms. The light outside had turned the living room wall gold. The copier light bar from the bank replayed itself in my head as if the day wanted to end with that same clean sweep. I stacked the folder, the extra copies, and the sticky note in one neat pile. I put the originals back in the canvas bag with the safe deposit key in its wax sleeve. I set them by the door where I could touch them without searching. Dusk arrived like a person who has been taught manners. The kitchen window glass held one last stripe of brightness, and then it let go. I stood and listened to the refrigerator and the far sprinkler one street over and the low roll of a car I did not need to check. When I sat again, I wrote 2 words on a fresh sheet of paper. Next steps. Underneath, I wrote 3 more. Verify, quiet, sequence. The copier's light bar passed through my memory a final time steady and exact, and the room seemed to square itself to the edges of the table. Camille's file smelled like toner and rain-clean lines, no adjectives. She slid it across the table in her small office where a rubber plant leaned toward a single window and a clock ticked like a metronome set to reasonable. Method, not fury, she said, and her hands moved like a person who has taught bad days how to behave. She had already labeled the binder with my name and a date. Inside chain of custody sleeves held copies of the bill of sale Harold had emailed my bank's stamped photocopies, and a print of Nora's sticky note set like a header. Don't argue. Document. She walked me through the first divider. Intake and scope. She read back what I had brought her and wrote 2 verbs I could live with. Verify. Sequence. Then she pulled an index tab forward that was printed in clean black letters. Decline narrative. She said, listen for this in Tessa's speech. She said the first concern sounds loving. The 5th sells your house. Her outline lived on 1 sheet. Phase 1 glamour. Trips that sell a bigger life and quietly nudge a partner's shame. Phase 2 gentle safety talk. Stairs yard distance to the hospital, the word downsizing disguised as care. Phase 3 urgency. Facility tours pamphlets, the phrase for your sake and a deadline dressed as an opportunity. Phase 4 liquidation. Joint signatures papers, shuffled under fatigue, a final push while the target is off balance. She kept a pencil on the page and did not press hard. This is not persuasion, she said. This is construction. We will follow the scaffolding until it shows itself. She opened a laptop and turned it so the screen sat between us like neutral ground. Public records first. Property and business filings in the counties where Tessa said she had lived. A pattern of gaps lined up next to stretches of nothing that looked intentional. She highlighted months that matched the 2 men in Nora's file. Phoenix, Tampa. She printed the summary and slid it into a sleeve with a fresh label. Workable leads, not accusations. The second divider held her tools. A small recorder the size of a lighter with audio consent cards to flash when needed. A log template with columns for date, time, location, participant, and verbatim phrases. A checklist for capturing exhibits without tipping the subject. You will not confront, she said. You will invite ordinary conversation and write down what people say. If you need to remember a sentence, step into another room and copy it while it is still warm. She flipped a page and put a fresh printout in front of me. The first micro twist of the day. 2 new credit lines opened in Adam's name in the last 6 weeks. Small limits. Not the kind that makes a bank call a mother, but the kind that introduces a balance you do not notice until it grows. Retail cards attached to stores that sell status. Boutiques with glossy bags. The thresholds were small enough that a paydown could keep them quiet for months. Common stepping stone, she said. It tells me the next move comes soon. I asked how she knew the next move, and she tapped the decline narrative tab again. Language gathers mass, she said. It rolls the same way down different streets. She asked me to describe exactly what Tessa had said at dinner when she visited the other night. I told her Tessa sat straight and smiled with her eyes off and said phrases that sounded like fine print recited as kindness. The house is too big for one. Stairs. Safety. The word worry arrived in a pack. Camille wrote the sentences down and then circled 3 words. Too big. Alone. Safety. She said you will hear these words again with a date attached. We will be ready. She turned the page and showed me an email she had drafted to my son that I could send if I chose. It was not a warning. It was a request for a quiet coffee with just the 2 of us, framed as a need for help organizing home paperwork. The subject line said file day. She said if he comes, you will not lecture. You will ask him to hold the ledger while you label a folder together. Let his hands touch the thing before his head rejects it. Her printer chuffed out a 1-page timeline she called the soft calendar. 7 days to gather, not announce. 10 days to establish routine logging. 2 weeks to stage one unforced phone call with a prior husband using the numbers in Nora's file speaker on witness present. You let him talk, she said. You do not suggest words, you listen for rhythm. When the stories match without your help, you file them, not perform them. She made a stack of forms with small boxes at the top right corner. Each box carried a single letter, D for document, C for contact, V for verified. She taught me to write a single sentence on each form and clip a matching exhibit to it. She said a judge understands a short sentence and a label better than a speech. We will not spring a trap, she said. We will walk her into her own. The office air changed when she pulled one more printout from a different tray. The credit report snapshot for Adam showed a third inquiry pending from a lender that markets consolidated balances and home equity lines. The amount field was blank and the status was recent. She tapped it with her pencil. This is the place where the story will try to change gravity, she said. If that line converts into a real application before he understands what he is authorizing, the slope gets steeper. She asked my permission to call Adam's phone carrier to confirm account security questions and to prepare a fraud watch flag he could activate with one sentence later. I said yes and wrote the steps in my log so the act would be witnessed on paper. Camille asked for copies of everything I had brought, then made her own copies on a machine that printed without drama. The copier light bar swept slowly and precisely. She put a yellow sticky on each stack with one verb. Keep, share, hold. She handed me a small envelope with 2 laminated cards. Audio consent, one for my wallet and one for the kitchen drawer. If you record a conversation, you say the place and the names aloud at the start, and you do it like reading a checklist before a flight, she said. We are not collecting stories, we are collecting statements. We paused and drank water that tasted faintly like the office pipes. The rubber plant moved a little like it agreed. Camille asked me to role-play one dinner question with her. Her voice softened into an ordinary interest. How are you managing the yard this summer, Sam? She waited while I answered in the way I might answer Tessa. Fine. It is a smaller work than most think. I asked for a time to practice the line that matters. Boundaries are for me, not against you. She said practice it now once. I did. She nodded and wrote the sentence in the margin of the log template as if to make it more real. She stapled the first 3 forms. The thunk of metal into paper sounded like a small door shutting where it should. We both looked at the clock. 8:10 p.m. The hour had slipped the way useful hours do. She stood and gathered the binder and handed it to me as if passing a relay baton designed by a clerk. You now have a record that can travel on its own, she said. When emotions show up later, let the binder talk first. On my way out, she gave me a card with 3 numbers written on the back. Credit Bureau Fraud Alert. County Records Clerk. A free legal aid hotline for seniors with a note that said, ask for intake by phone, do not discuss facts beyond what is on your page. She added one more sheet to my folder. A single paragraph template for a durable power of attorney revocation in case a copy existed in the wild from any past paperwork games. Fill with black ink. Notarize at your bank. Date it in full words so it cannot be altered with a number. In the hall, I stopped and asked her if she thought my son would forgive himself. She did not reach for comfort. She reached for a point of reference. Shame is a fog, she said. Paper is a lighthouse. We are building you a light he can steer by when he is ready. She said, do not punish the person you hope will return. Punish the plan by making it visible. Outside, the air smelled like rain had thought about coming and decided to wait until after midnight. I set the binder on the passenger seat next to Nora's ledger and the bank folder, and felt the truck tilt a hair from the weight of the order. On the drive home, I rehearsed what the next 7 days would look like, not with speeches, but with tasks. Make one labeled box on the kitchen table. Start the log. Call Harold in the morning and ask him to hold the car behind closed doors while we build our footing. Text Adam with the file day subject line and nothing else. Back in my kitchen, I lay the binder open to the first divider. The copier light passed through my memory again and quieted my hands. I wrote the date on the top right corner of the log and printed the first line clean. Contacted PI. Scope set. Method chosen. I placed the audio consent card in the drawer with the rubber bands and the tape measure. I slid the decline narrative tab out where I could see it and then slid it back where it belonged. I set the stapler on the binder like a paperweight. The refrigerator hummed. The house agreed. I did not plan a trap. I planned a walkway made of small named stones. If Tessa stepped on it, the sound would be hers. I plated meatloaf and the room smelled like all the Saturdays we did right. Steam rose off the pan in little flags and the ketchup glaze shone the way it always did under warm light. I set 2 placemats from Nora's quilting on the table and left 1 chair empty on purpose. Not as a shrine, as a reminder that space can be held without words. Adam arrived first with the careful gait of someone rehearsing neutral. He looked at the placemats, touched the stitched corner. The way you touch a doorknob you already know, and the stiffness in his shoulders lost 1 notch. He said it smelled like the month we learned to chop onions without tears. I said the trick had been a cold knife, not magic. Tessa came in behind him in a dress that translated the house into a backdrop. She handed me a bottle of something tall and said it paired well with comfort. I set it to the side and poured water into 3 glasses so the sound could do the talking. We ate in the way families learn to eat after a meal. Slow, small bites, questions with soft edges. Adam asked about the yard, and I told him the grass grows whether I worry or not. Tessa asked about the stairs and the nights and the locks, and I answered as if she had asked about the mail. The house is 1 flight. My nights keep their own calendar. The locks work when I turn them. She smiled like a person doing a favor and folded her napkin so it made a square as precise as a floor plan. The chair across from me stayed empty and useful. Adam looked at it once, then back at his plate, then back at me with a flicker that said his head was a step behind his heart. I asked him to pass the salt, and he did it in a movement older than his marriage. Tessa steered the talk toward helpfulness with tiny nicks of language. Too big for one. Yard care at your age. Distance to the hospital. She said the word safe twice and let it sit. I kept my hands flat on the table until I knew they would not do anything but steady a plate. We had coffee and pie the way you do when meaning has to be moved without lifting your voice. The kitchen clock ticked its plain seconds. Adam told a short story about his office air conditioner fighting the afternoon sun and found himself laughing in the middle of it like a man surprised by his own lungs. Tessa asked if I had thought about downsizing and waited for agreement to echo back. I said I had thought about making the porch light automatic, and that had solved the problem I actually had. She praised practicality while rearranging the pie fork to point toward my right hand. I asked Adam to help me carry a box to the living room. He stood with that immediate obedience that boys keep if you do not take it from them too early. Tessa said she would use the bathroom and excused herself with the kind of smile you see in waiting rooms. Adam and I moved a carton of labeled tax records and stacked it on the end table. He looked relieved to wash his hands, and I let him hold them a second longer than necessary. Then he stopped, turned his head toward the stairwell, and listened. Upstairs, a door hinge answered a touch that was too soft to be a bathroom door. Adam blinked. He looked at me like a man checking the face of a watch to confirm what time means. I did not chase. I waited at the doorway and said I would label my folders now. It saves time for everyone. My voice was light enough to pass for polite and heavy enough to land. Tessa reappeared at the top of the stairs with a hand on the rail and a laugh that did not spread to her eyes. She said she had taken a wrong turn. She said this house had more rooms than it needed and apologized to the air between us. I stepped aside and let her pass as if it were any ordinary hallway to any ordinary room. Back at the table, I set a thin manila envelope beside the water pitcher. The notary's stamp gave it a small raised gravity. I slid it toward the middle so no one would have to reach far to see it. I said I stopped by the bank earlier and updated some paperwork that Nora and I had let go too long. The durable power of attorney language had been useful during hospital years, and now it was a loose wire in a panel that needed tightening. I said it the way an electrician says we replaced a breaker because it tripped when the microwave and the dryer sang together. Adam looked where I wanted him to look. He read the first line silently. Revocation of any prior durable power of attorney. He set his fingertips on the paper as if it might move without them. Tessa did not touch it. She admired the clean seal and said a household runs better when paperwork keeps pace. I said a good paper saves everyone time. I said boundaries are for me, not against you. Adam worked his jaw and then set his hand flat. He said I was doing what Nora would have done. He said it with more certainty than he probably felt, and that was good enough for the night. Tessa reached for the bottle she had brought and asked if I would like a taste. I said water was fine and filled my glass again, letting the faucet make its ordinary note. She set the bottle back like a chess piece and praised the pie. Her eyes did not leave the envelope. Adam did. He traced the notary's seal with his gaze, and you could see his mind changing shape, not yet a new form, but leaving the old one. He asked if I needed help with anything else this week, and I said I would be reorganizing some files. He said he could come by after work tomorrow, and I said the porch light would be on. We cleared plates in a quiet choreography learned long ago. Adam carried dishes. Tessa wiped the table with a paper towel folded once and then again. I stood at the drawer and slid the audio consent card next to the rubber bands without looking any different than a man putting something away he might need later. Tessa asked if there was anything she could take downstairs, and I said I had it. I opened the refrigerator, found space for the leftover pie, and closed the door with a gentle seal. They put their shoes on in the entryway. Adam hugged me in a way he had not hugged in a while, the extra second that used to belong to the end of football games. Tessa put a hand on his arm and said we would talk soon about simplifying. I said we would keep the calendar simple. Yes. The porch light clicked on ahead of schedule because I had said it earlier. They walked to the car and the night took them in. Inside, I did not move the envelope. I wanted to see if I could leave something important in the middle of the table without having to guard it. The house had its opinion and it approved. I rinsed coffee cups under warm water and the sound paired well with the thought that the night had gone according to plan. Not dramatic, not mean, not weak. When the phone buzzed in my pocket, I let it buzz again so my hands could dry. It was Camille. The text was 6 words. Good. Boundaries are spoken about once. Keep logging. I put the phone face down and sat. The empty chair did its work without any ceremony. It made a space where a person could imagine himself tomorrow making a different choice than the one he made yesterday. I wrote 2 short lines in the log before I forgot the exact words. Tessa used a safe and too big and alone. I noted the upstairs detour without opinion and labeled it exactly what it was. Observed the subject near the file cabinet while excused to the restroom. No confrontation. Then I underlined the line that mattered. Delivered notarized revocation. Boundary set. No argument. The refrigerator and the clock kept each other company. I took one more look up the stairs to the room where Nora used to keep a row of empty folders waiting to be named. I would refill them tomorrow with labels that matched the day we were living in, not the one someone else wanted to sell to us. I picked up the envelope and slid it into the binder under the tab that said D, for document, the one Camille had lettered like she was building a bridge. The stapler thunked once clean and final, and I glanced at the clock without meaning to. 8:10 p.m. Again, as if the day wanted to tell me a pattern can belong to anyone who puts it to good use. I slid 2 numbers across the table and told my son I would be awake if he called back. He looked at the paper like it might burn through the wood. Phoenix on one line, Tampa the next. His high school state ring turned on his finger without him knowing it. The wall clock above the stove ticked too loudly like the room had moved closer to the hands. He said, "What am I supposed to say to strangers?" I said nothing that is not true. I said, "Ask for their names and their dates and let them tell you the story they know." I said, "If you need a reason, say you are checking on a detail for a warranty." He almost smiled at the word detail. He put the paper in his pocket like a person stows a boarding pass and stood up too fast for the chair. He said if he called it would be tonight. He touched the envelope with the notary seal as if to steady himself, and then he left. The house went quiet the way a road goes quiet after a plow. I cleaned the plates because hands need work when heads are full. The state ring kept turning in my mind. How a boy earns something once and keeps touching it when he has forgotten why. I put the ledger on the table without opening it. I set a pen on top like a paperweight and told myself I would not write a thing until he called. The first spike landed before the coffee finished. My phone lit the kitchen with that particular blue a screen makes when the rest of the house is asleep. "Dad," he wrote, "I am calling one now." Then the ring. I answered and did not fill the line with sound. He said Phoenix answered on the 3rd ring with a name that matched the page. He said the man had that dry, careful voice you hear from people who have had to hold themselves together for too long. He said he explained he was checking a detail for a warranty, which made the man laugh in a way that was not unkind. Adam spoke and paused the way a person carries water from a deep well. He said he asked about a wife named Vanessa once, and the man said the name that was not the name. Then corrected himself, then sighed, like dropping a bag. He said the man mentioned the same words we had heard at dinner. Too big for one. Safety. For your sake. He said the man sold a condo to pay for a suite in a place with wide hallways and a piano in the lobby. He said the woman left 2 weeks after the ink dried, and the money went with her, and that he did not realize what had happened until he walked into his mother's room and she asked when she could go home. Adam went quiet long enough that I could hear the clock. He said the man told him to keep his papers close and his voice low, and that he wished someone had slid him 2 numbers the year he needed them. We hung up, and I stood very still and let the refrigerator hum find me. The second spike came faster. He wrote Tampa next, and then he called before I could type well. He said the man picked up on the first ring like he had been sitting beside the phone for months waiting for anyone to believe him. He said it was the same playbook told in a different accent, a small auto shop, a funeral, a woman who arrived as comfort and left as a ledger entry. He said the man had chased to Costa Rica with a map made of receipts and then run out of money and reasons at the same time. Adam said he read him the dates from Nora's file, and the man said, "Those are mine. Those are exact." And then the man asked my son if he had a mother still in her own house. Adam could not answer for a second. Then he said yes, and the man said, "Do not let anyone sell what she built while you are tired." After the second call, I did not say I told you. I did not say how you could not see. I said write the dates. He wrote them in the Notes app because his hands were shaking too much for a pen. He said he was going home. He said he needed to test something before his head told him it was unnecessary. I said nothing that would slow him. The clock hands crossed and kept moving, and I let them. The third spike did not ring. It arrived as a text that said I asked Tessa where she grew up again, and she answered a different town. Then my phone rang, and he spoke without structure because structure had just been taken from him. He said he went home and put 2 mugs on the counter and said, "Tell me your maiden name," and she did. And it was the one he knew, and he asked her the town, and she said a different one than the one she had told at Thanksgiving. He asked her about the college again, and she traded one state for another. He tried not to lead, and the wrong answers kept coming out like sparks from a wire you think is dead. He said he asked for the statements on the new cards, and she said they were business, and he said, "What business?" And she said, "Do you not trust your wife?" And he said, "Tell me why your maiden name changed twice." I said nothing and let silence do the math. He held the phone away from his ear for a moment, and I could hear a door somewhere in his house open and close. He said she was pacing. He said she said he was weak for double-checking her and that everyone else she had ever been with trusted her. He said she used the words just and only, and never until the sentences shrank down to the size of an accusation he was supposed to wear. He said he did not shout. He said he breathed in and out like he was remembering practice from a field he had not played on for 20 years. He said he told her he wanted to see the statements, and he wanted to put a freeze on the lines that had his name before anything else happened. He went quiet, and then he said she laughed in a way he had not heard before. He said she took a small bag from the bedroom closet that had already been packed. He said she called him a problem and said she would be at Kara's for the night and that they would talk in the morning when he had calmed down. He said she left and forgot to slam the door, and that made it worse. He said the ring on his hand felt like a weight that did not belong on his finger. I told him to take photos of the credit offers on the counter if any had come in the mail and to put them in a folder called Record Not Story. He did it while we were still on the line. I told him to sit at the kitchen table with a glass of water and log 3 sentences like he was working a simple job. He said he could do that. I said I would be awake if he called back. He said he needed a few minutes without a voice in his ear. We hung up. The house did that thing it does when you are waiting on another person. Every noise belongs to them. The ice maker. The dog is 2 doors down. A car on the cross street is slowing for a sign that no one else can see. I wrote a single line in my log. Adam called Phoenix. Adam called Tampa. Language matches dinner. Then I set the pen down and let it stay where it fell. Midnight slid past without ceremony. The phone lit the kitchen again, and I answered. He said he was coming by tomorrow after work to help me label the file drawer, and that he did not want Tessa to know where he was for a few hours. He said he wanted to hold the ledger again and look at his mother's handwriting, even if it knocked him sideways. He asked if I could leave the porch light on. I said the porch light lives on a timer now, and that was the point. He did not laugh, but he understood. He asked one more question like a boy trying to be a man, trying to be a boy again. He asked if I was angry. I said I was a little angry at gravity and a lot grateful for paper. I said shame is a fog and paper is a lighthouse. He exhaled the way men do when they finally hear a sentence that gives their body something to do besides brace. He said he would call Camille in the morning if I sent the number, and I said I would. We hung up, and I let the house hear me put the phone on the table. The screen went dark and showed me my own face for a second, and then it lit again with his name. One last thing he wrote. He said he had looked at the title application Harold had sent, and the place where my name should be looked like someone had tried to write with the wrong hand. He said he felt sick at the thought of his own signature near anything like that. He said tomorrow he would change his security questions and stand next to me while we sorted out what came next. I typed well. Then I typed, "I am proud of you." Then I erased proud and wrote steady because that was closer to what the night had earned. The kitchen fell back into the kind of quiet that is not empty. It is a quiet that asks for the next right thing. The phone screen lit the table again, this time with Camille's name appearing in a banner. It glowed like a small runway light in a field that knows how to bring a plane home. Camille's email subject line was the whole weather report in 4 words. Ohio alias link forwarded. I opened it at the kitchen table with the binder and Nora's ledger stacked to my left like ballast. Camille wrote that the surname Vance matched a 2017 utility record and a 2018 traffic citation that never answered its own mail. She had attached 2 PDFs and a short note asking permission to send them straight to a contact at the airport police. I typed yes and hit send before my second breath finished. Then I watched the clock because the clock was steady. Her reply landed with a new subject line that changed the room temperature. 2 active warrants under Lila Vance. 1 in Arizona for felony fraud, 1 in Florida for theft by deception. Attached were docket numbers, a cross-state contact tree, and a clean summary a judge could read without squinting. She wrote that she had already pinged Lieutenant Chen and would coordinate a call. She said to bring Adam in on the paperwork if he is ready to witness his own name on the credit lines. Justice is coordination, not volume. I wrote that on a sticky and set it where my eyes would trip over it. The phone rang and the clock confirmed the hour. Camille bridged us to Lieutenant Chen on a 3-way line. His voice sounded like a runway light. "We do it clean at the checkpoint," he said. "No spectacle. Bring Adam for the affidavit." He asked for a list of what we could prove before sunrise. Camille read him our inventory like a quartermaster. Bill of sale copy with the amount and the signature that I wanted to be mine. The title application kicked for a mismatch. 2 recorded calls to former husbands with dates that rhyme. Affidavit template for identity theft on the new cards. Safe deposit note summarizing bonds and independence because motive questions come with the morning. He asked for timestamps and we gave him timestamps. While we talked, the printer queue spat out small storms. Affidavit forms. A 1-page narrative in my hand that had no adjectives. I wrote each time at the top right corner and stapled in order because order is how some days hold. Camille asked if Adam could be at my place by midnight. I texted him the file and the porch light will be on. His answer came back fast. On my way. By the time Adam sat at the table, the binder, the ledger, and a glass of water were already waiting. He set his state ring next to the pen like he knew he might twist it until it fell off. He read the affidavit lines with his lips moving once like a person tasting a new medicine. He wrote his name and he did not look away when his hand shook in the last letter. Camille listened on speaker and coached where the boxes wanted to trick him. She had him initial near the printed statement that said, "I did not authorize these lines or these withdrawals." She had me sign as a witness and then had me slide the page into a chain of custody sleeve. The plastic made a soft sound like a zipper without teeth. I sealed the envelope and wrote the minute on the flap. 12:41 a.m. Camille's next email arrived with screenshots from a bank fraud watch. 3 ATM withdrawals in 90 minutes within a 12-mile arc, all in the direction of the interstate. She annotated each with a corner timestamp. The amounts were the kind of person who stacks them in an envelope when she thinks paper will outrun questions. Then came the reservation hit. A 6:05 a.m. departure listed under L. Vance with a one-way to a city where cash answers more doors than names. The note at the bottom said, "This is the point where we stop trusting gravity and start trusting process." I circled the process until the ink shone. Lutchen called back with a plan like a blueprint. He would position 2 plainclothes at the checkpoint and 1 uniform near the exit that people use when their first plan fails. He would have a quiet room ready for statements. He said again, "We will do it clean." He said the arrest would ride on the outstanding warrants if identity confirmed and our local case would build itself with our paper over the day. He asked for one more thing, photographs of our chain of events. Not drama, just evidence traveling from hand to hand. I pulled a disposable camera from a kitchen drawer. 2 shots left from a wedding we never developed. I wound the wheel until it stopped. The click sounded like a promise held over from a year that felt easier. We photographed the table with the binder open to the affidavit tab. We photographed the envelope sealed and the clock face behind it. We photographed Adam holding the page with the seal visible and the date at the top. Then I set the camera on the counter so I would not get greedy with proof. 2 frames were enough to tell one small truth without becoming a performance. Camille reminded us to eat something simple and pack a folder that could be carried under one arm. She told Adam to bring his ID and the last letter he had received about a credit offer so that the badge could see what his eyes had seen. She told me to bring the notarized revocation and the bill of sale copy and leave the ledger at home. Nora's handwriting had already done her part. The rest belonged to forms and names that matched records. The house made a sound that the house rarely makes. Quiet feet moving at a speed that does not belong to panic. Adam rinsed his glass and put it in the rack without my saying a word. We stood at the drawer where keys live, and he did not look at the hook where his old spare had once hung. He straightened the folder stack like a man putting the last tool back into a case he is about to carry into a job. Camille texted one last line. "Meet me curbside arrivals at 4:40. I will hand off the packet to Chen so you are not juggling it through security." She added, "Good. Method holds." We left the porch light on because timers are how you tell yourself you intend to come home. The truck took the street in a low growl. We did not fill the ride with talk. Adam breathed out like a man walking toward the truth at a pace he could keep. A half-mile from the airport, a freight train talked to the dawn. One long horn at 4:12 a.m., the kind that draws a straight line through whatever fog is left. The airport marquee flickered into frame like a heartbeat. The letters cycled from dark to promise to steady. We pulled into the lane where you are not supposed to wait and waited anyway for 30 seconds because the hour belonged to men with purpose. Camille arrived in a gray sedan that looked like it should have a clipboard in the glove box. She stepped out with a packet sealed in a clear bag and a small list clipped to the outside. She said chain of custody and tapped the clip. She nodded to Adam the way you nod to someone who has something heavy to carry but is not going to drop it. She walked us to the entrance where the floor turns from wet to dry and handed the bag to Lutar Chen with a name and a time. He wrote them down in a notebook that had no elastic, no flourish, just the authority of straight lines. He repeated the plan, no spectacle, checkpoint, confirm identity against the warrants, quiet room after. He asked Adam one question. "Are you prepared to say those words in front of a recorder?" Adam said he was and wiped his palms on his jeans without drama. We moved to the vantage point behind a pillar that lets you see without being seen. The checkpoint hummed with bins and belts and the soft talk of people who learned to stand in lines before they learned to sleep well. I checked my folder without opening it. Notarized revocation on top, bill of sale copy in the middle, affidavit in its sleeve with the seal showing like a lighthouse lens. Adam stood next to me and turned his ring once and then stopped turning it because some habits know when to be quiet. Chen's plainclothes took their marks the way men step onto painted footprints. One watched the ID podium and the other floated near the stanchions that made channels where there would otherwise be a crowd. The uniform at the exit pretended to read a sign with both hands behind his back and his weight rolling heel to toe like a man thinking about nothing. Camille stayed a few feet off with a clipboard. She did not look at her eyes on reflections in the glass where a person becomes a shape that cannot lie about direction. We did not use chase verbs. There was no chase. There was only positioning and breath and a clock that promised a 6:05. We watched the lane where wheels whisper and belts whisper and shoes tell the story of how a person carries herself. Adam put his hand on the edge of the pillar the way a pilot puts a hand on a fuselage before climbing in. The disposable camera weighed almost nothing in my pocket and still reminded me that pictures are supposed to be earned. A woman in a coat the color of currency approached the line with 2 suitcases and a face that knew how to be forward without being remembered. She handed over a boarding pass that carried a name that had lived in 3 states without forwarding its mail. Chen moved with the pace he had promised, no spectacle. He lifted his chin and a plainclothes stepped in at an angle that was polite and unavoidable. He spoke her birth name like he had practiced it once and would not need to practice it again. The second officer adjusted the stanchion rope a few inches, so a new channel formed where there had not been one. It was not a trap. It was geometry. We observed. We coordinated. We did not raise a voice. The hour belonged to the method. The last shot in my disposable camera stayed unspent while the room arranged itself around the thing we had to do next. We watched from behind a pillar as the morning turned the floor to chrome. Light from the high windows slid across the tile and made the stanchion ropes glow like lines on a map. The belts hummed. The bins skated. The checkpoint breathed in and out like a machine that knows its job. Adam stood close enough that I could feel the air move when he swallowed. I kept the folder under my arm and the last frame in the disposable camera in my pocket, where it could not tempt me too soon. She arrived the way practiced people arrive. 2 cases moving as if on rails, coat the color of money without logos. Sunglasses that made the ceiling lights into tiny moons. She handed a boarding pass to the podium and placed her bag in a bin as if she had rehearsed everything down to the angle of her wrist. Lao Ti-Chen's plain clothes stepped when they should step. Not quick, not slow. They spoke her birth name in a voice that did not need a second try. For half a breath, nothing moved. Then the boarding pass bent under her fingers until a crease cracked the paper. Her chin tilted like an ear searching for a new frequency. One officer eased a half step to the side and the stanchion rope moved 2 inches to give everyone room to breathe. There was no shove. There was only geometry. She set the boarding pass on the podium and said she did not know that name. She said her name was the one on the paper, and the officer nodded like a teacher who has heard 100 versions of the same test answer. Security asked for ID. She reached into her bag and then changed her mind and reached for a suitcase handle instead. The wheels skittered against the polished floor, and the sound told more truth than any sentence could. She aimed for a gap that was not a gap. The second officer had already adjusted the rope. It was a clean intercept. A hand hovered near an elbow without grabbing until the step itself stalled. There was no tackle. There was momentum, and then no momentum. She was guided, not forced, toward a small space where questions live. The uniform at the exit spoke her birth name again, and it fit the air like a key sliding home. She stopped, and the morning stopped with her. A manager in a vest appeared with a bin and a wand, and the practiced patience of a person who answers to procedures. The carry-on unzipped and opened on the inspection table with the sound of a book beginning. Inside lay cash in rubber bands like small bricks. A second passport with a photo that told one story and a name that told another. A zip pouch with a thumb drive and a pack of SIM cards. On the bottom, a fan of brochures for elder care communities with notes in the margins. Words circled: safe, rapid placement, family resistance. The manager lifted one page with 2 fingers like you lift something that needs to be seen and not touched. Phones came out around us because phones always do. A murmur rose the way a tide does when people sense a shape in the water. She saw us then. She saw Adam first and then me by extension. Anger found her face after denial lost it. She said weakly to the air where he stood. She said, ungrateful. She said if he had been a man with vision, none of this would be necessary. She said the word safety in a tone that made it sound like a weapon. I stepped half a pace in front of Adam. I did not speak to her. I spoke to him. We go home now. He nodded once, and the nod was more groan than anything he had done in months. The disposable camera sat in my palm before I knew my hand had decided. I lifted it and took the last shot. Not her face, not the men, the table, the open suitcase, the cash stacks, the passport corners, the brochure with a handwritten note that read, "For your sake," in ink, that matched 2 other papers in my file. The flash popped and washed the scene for an instant, and then the light settled where it belonged. Her voice rose because that is what happens when a plan finds a wall. She said, "You think a little paper can stop me?" She said, "I built this for 3 years." She said more things no one needed to memorize because the room already had its own recorder. 2 bystanders held their phones in a way that would end up on someone else's feed before the hour turned. Chen did not rush to cage a moment. He let the moment hang there and become its own proof. Then he nodded to the uniform, and the uniform nodded back, and the suitcase closed, and the passport went into an evidence bag that made a long zipper sound like a line being drawn. A plainclothes officer asked Adam to confirm his name and the existence of the new credit lines while we were still near the pillar. He did not add drama. He spoke like a person reading from a form because that is exactly what he was doing. Adam answered in the simple words we had practiced. He said he did not open those accounts. He said he did not authorize any use of those accounts. He said he did not grant anyone the right to sign on his mother's behalf. The officer wrote each sentence in block letters on a small card and slid it into a sleeve. He asked Adam if he would repeat those words in a quiet room as soon as we were done here. Adam said yes, and his voice did not shake. She kept talking, but the sentences were losing their shape. She called us names that did not help her. She told a stranger to mind his business, and the stranger looked down at his phone and minded it by pressing record again. She said the cash was for a purchase and the passport was for convenience and the brochures were part of charity work. The officer nodded without nodding. He had the patience of men who know that a list of items can speak more clearly than any witness with a pulse. The boarding pass lay on the podium where she had set it. The crease had split enough that the paper had become two pieces that still touched. I looked at that small fact, and it felt truer than a metaphor. Chen gestured, and the officers shifted their weight and began to move the scene from public to private. No spectacle, no parade, just a lane made by bodies and the quiet terms of a warrant from two states that had been waiting for her to try a third. She tried one last time to make a story fit a space too small for it. She said she had been helping us. She said we should be grateful. She said we would be sorry. None of it felt like verbs. It felt like air that had already left the room. We did not gloat. We did not follow. We stood long enough to watch the evidence bag seal and the suitcase return to itself and the plainclothes officer lift the brochures by the edges like specimens. Then we turned away a half step at a time until we were facing the exit. The automatic doors hissed and the outside air met our faces early and honestly. On the curb, Camille exhaled the way a runner does when the mark is crossed. She did not smile. She gathered her clipboard, wrote a time, and handed Adam a simple card with the room number where he would repeat his sentences. She told me to take the camera to a 1-hour lab later and staple the receipt to the chain of events log. She touched the folder under my arm with 2 fingers as if checking a gauge. She said, "Good." That was clean. Adam and I walked toward the lane where the truck waited. He did not twist his ring. He looked at his hand like it belonged to him again. He said he could still hear her saying the word safety like a blade. I said some words can be made into anything if you do not pin them to dates and signatures. He said he wanted to sit at my table before talking to anyone else. I said the porch light would be on. We crossed at the crosswalk that leads back to cars with old floor mats and coffee cups, 2 sips from empty. A shuttle bus sighed and a line of suitcases clicked against their handles and the world kept the hour it was keeping. In the rear glass of the terminal, the scene behind us looked small and contained like a diorama in a museum where schoolchildren whisper because the past is behind glass and cannot reach out. In the cab, I set the folder on my lap and ran my thumb along the edge to feel the paper like a pulse. We did not speak for 3 blocks. Then Adam said, "Thank you not for buying him out of a mistake, but for letting him find the map himself." I said I had not handed him a map. I had kept the weather off the road while he read the signs. He nodded, and the nod had the right weight. We hit a light that turned green before we had to stop. The truck rolled under it easily. Behind us, the automatic doors closed with another soft hiss, and the morning took a deeper breath. We did not look back. We do not gloat. We exit. At sunrise, my coffee didn't taste like payback. It tasted like air, the kind you feel in your teeth when the night finally lets go. I stood at the sink and watched the window brighten by degrees. The house had slept the way honest houses sleep. No creaks, no arguments. Just the refrigerator kept time while the paper cooled on the kitchen table. The brass lighthouse keychain lay in my palm like a pulse. I tossed it once and caught it because the habit felt like a small promise kept. Adam came down the hall with the slow tread of a man who met his own reflection and decided to keep it. He looked at the ledger, then at me, then at the empty chair. He said, "I don't deserve this." I said, "We aren't renewing a debt. We're renewing a promise." He folded his hands as if that sentence made it possible to stand where he was standing. The morning lay flat and bright on the driveway when Harold turned in. The GTO rode behind him on a soft strap the color of sand. He parked at the curb, stepped down, and for a second he just looked at the house as if asking permission from someone we both knew. He lifted a folder from the passenger seat and walked up with the file held square in 2 hands. He greeted the air like a shopman does when he brings good news that needs to be written down. We didn't crowd the car. We stood at the table and let Harold do what he came to do. He took a deep breath and placed a clean bill of sale on the wood. Labels in the right corners, amounts where amounts belong, his name on the line that gives my name on the line that receives. He explained without adornment that the 15 had been his way to get the car into shelter, that he had no interest in profit and would not accept more than he had paid. He said it slowly for the record. He said we were undoing a number, not a relationship. He set a second page beside it for Adam's eyes. A simple acknowledgement that he understood the transfer and that the title would carry my hand, not a forgery's echo. We signed. Harold stamped his copy with a notary block he keeps for days like this, not showy, just the pressure of raised letters on paper that will outlast argument. Adam watched the ink dry as if the drying itself had a sound. Harold slid the originals into a sleeve and handed me a copy the way people pass a folded flag. He said the car doesn't belong to a ledger, Sam. It belongs to the people who will keep it honest. He nodded toward the garage like a man pointing to where the day should go next. The strap came off as if it were tired and grateful. Harold eased the GTO into the driveway with the reverence you use when pushing a piano across good floors. The engine didn't have to start to be present. It sat on its own gravity. The oil shadow in the stall waited like a shape the room had learned to miss. I walked to the bench and set the lighthouse keychain down in the ring worn by Nora's thermos. The ring fit like it had been waiting for metal again. Adam drifted to the fender and kept a respectful inch between skin and paint. He ran his hand across the air above the curve without touching it. He said, "I still don't deserve this. I said she built it for a family. That didn't change because we forgot how to behave for a minute." He swallowed and looked like a boy trying not to be. He said, "I will show up, not big speeches." Tasks. I said tasks are what keep bridges standing. Harold asked if I wanted him to back the car in or if I wanted the first drive into the stall. I said I would take the wheel, and he smiled the way men smile when a decision sits right. He stood at the garage mouth with Adam, and the two of them watched from the place where watchers belong when something quiet and important is about to happen. I opened the door and sat. The seat held the memory of us and the day ahead all at once. The wheel fit my hands like the tool it is. On the passenger seat, I set Nora's ledger open to a blank page. On the top line, I wrote 2 words. Next, miles. The engine lit with a sound that felt less like noise and more like intention. I let it idle until the note settled. Pedal. Brake. A hand on the shifter to feel the lever teach the body. I eased forward and let the sun catch the hood once before I turned. Then I fed the car back into its home. The front tires kissed the old stain in the exact place where tread had lived for years. I stopped with the quiet of a sentence ending where it should. I sat there long enough for the engine to sigh once. Then I turned the key, and the room heard the click. That means enough. The quiet that followed did not feel like absence. It felt like a purpose. I looked up and met Adam's eyes and saw a man balancing anger and grace without tipping either cup. Harold exhaled. He placed his palm flat on the garage jamb as if thanking the wood for holding. We sorted what remained without ceremony. Harold and I took photos of the signed bill of sale, one with the clock in frame, one with the garage door behind it. He tucked his copy into his folder, and I slid mine into Camille's binder under D for document. Adam wrote the date on the ledger's new page, and under next miles, he drew a short line and wrote, "Back home." That was enough for a start. We stood in a triangle the way men do when no one wants to leave first. Harold spoke to Adam without decorating the sentence. He said, "Men get fooled. Good ones repair." He turned to me and said, "Nora set 3 people in motion, and 2 of them were us." He tapped the fender softly with the back of 2 fingers. Not a touch, a promise, and stepped back. On the walk to his truck, he paused by the flower bed and looked at the single stake I had put in last fall to remind myself to plant in spring. He grinned and said, "You will want a taller one if you're growing tomatoes." He said he would check back after lunch in case I needed help with any DMV minutes, and then he left without the flourish of a horn. Inside, the kitchen had turned warm in that way rooms do when something hard lands and stays put. Adam washed 2 mugs. He dried one and left the other upside down on the rack. He said he had an appointment with a counselor this week and that he would go even if he didn't know what to say yet. I said talking is not the first job. Showing up is. He nodded. He said he wanted to finish retightening the file cabinet screws and maybe fix the sticking drawer in Nora's desk. I said the screwdriver lives where it always lived. He found it without asking. I took the lighthouse keychain to the garage and stood in the familiar air. I clipped it to the ring and let it fall against the keys with a sound that cleared something I hadn't known was cloudy. The ledger on the passenger seat waited open and patient. I wrote a second line under "Back home." Teach Adam to feel third without looking. The pencil made a shallow and brave groove. We gave the car the day. No parade, no long road to a place that doesn't matter. We learned where the jack sits easiest and which shelf wants brake cleaner and which rag belongs where. Adam said the words, "I'm sorry," in a voice that did not beg to be absolved. I said we have miles, not martyrs. He nodded like the idea fit. We ate leftover pie standing up with the garage door open to the kind of light that comes only when you let it. Toward evening, Harold texted that the DMV clerk had scanned the paperwork clean and that my title would show my hand and no one else's before the week rolled over. I wrote thank you and put the phone down before the word could turn into more. There is a right size for gratitude when men are trying to do their jobs. When the sun angled low enough to gild the pegboard outlines, I slid behind the wheel one more time and rolled the car 3 feet forward and 3 feet back just to feel the geometry of returning get written into the floor. Adam stood at the front of the stall and watched the tire find its old place as if it had GPS fixed in concrete. He rubbed the state ring with his thumb and then let his hand hang idle. We didn't make speeches. We made small decisions. The porch light went to a new timer. The file drawer got graphite. The revocation stayed clipped under D and the bill of sale under C, and the binder sat where a man can reach it in the dark. Adam turned to go and hesitated like a traveler hefting a bag to check the weight. He said, "I will be back in the morning if that's all right." I said the coffee will be ready and the ledger open. He smiled in a way that didn't need teeth to be true. Night came on softly. I eased the GTO fully into the stall and let the stillness settle around it like a fitted cover. I reached for the wall and touched the switch. The garage light clicked off. It sounded like a period. We both knew it was a comma. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on screen.